imposter syndrome, which tends to be how many of us feel when we start a new job, right? Like, oh my God, are they gonna know that I'm new? Go ahead, Alan.
For the assignment today, we're not able to submit it.
For
No, ATA.
what is that? Let me see, ATA. What assignment are you referencing? I'm looking at it. I don't see.
Uh, the week 4 Monday.
Mhm.
Week 4 Monday.
Are you talking about the
Professional ethics scenario?
Yeah, it says, oh, you mean the box is not there. Hold on.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was like, what? I don't know what the yeah, there you go. All right. Sorry about that. Those assignments, we changed them, and when they moved over to ATA for some reason, the options didn't move over. Sorry about that. All right, so okay, I have somebody else that can't get in. Did you guys have trouble logging in today, or I don't know if this person's just one second. I'm just helping her. While I do this, I actually wanted to show you guys something anyway. How many people know how to get to the survey? How many people know how to get to the survey? I'm going to show you really quickly. I think I may need to help this student get online anyway. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me stop sharing this really quick. And I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go into the classroom. And for ATA, the classroom may look a little different, just a different color, but everything else should be the same. All right, can you guys see my screen again? Somebody give me a quick thumbs up. Okay, so what you do is, because the way I put the shortcuts here on the homepage, access to the survey, you won't see it, right? So what you have to do is you have to come over to modules, and I want you guys to follow along with me so you can go ahead and do this. Not every instructor puts those shortcut buttons up there. So most students have to go here through modules. And then if you scroll down past week 3, you'll see here it says student survey. You see that? If you guys that are following along, go ahead and click on it and do me a favor and take that survey really quickly. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to do that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to see if I can help this student get on. All right. So just do that, and then like 5 minutes and we'll come right back. Okay. Normally I have music playing in the background, but while they're doing that, is there anyone that has any questions? Any last minute questions? Any questions for this week? Please remember that This is a short week. Class does end on Thursday. Your final is open, guys. Your final is open. So you don't have to wait till Thursday to do your final. You can start that right now if you wanted to. Not pressuring you or encouraging you to do that, but I'm just letting you know that you can start that right now. Jamari, if you're just joining, I don't know if you're at your computer or not, but we're taking our survey. It's right between week 3 and week 4. If you have access to your Canvas, if you can go ahead and take that survey real quick, that'd be great. If not, just please try to get that done before Thursday. That'd be great. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys, for doing that. I know there may be 1 or 2 people that are still doing that, and they'll come back in a minute. Let me go ahead and stop that and reshare our PowerPoint for today. So, like I said, congratulations to those of us that are graduating. This idea of imposter syndrome, and it'll discuss it a little bit in chapter 13, which we're in today, all has to do with, yes, anytime you start a new job, and I don't care how much education you get, or even if how much you think you know, how many of us are still nervous as all get out when we start something new? And I'll go first. I even get nervous when I start a new class. And I've been teaching for almost 18 years. You would think, girlfriend, if you don't have it by now, something's wrong with you, right? Or I work as a contractor. I write grants and contracts. I've been doing that for almost 30 years. And every single time I get a new client, I'm like, Cynthia, why do you put yourself through this? What is my anxiety goes through the roof, because I don't know if I just am an overachiever. I just want to do well. I don't know what it is, but I'm like, you're going to have to really come up with a system to not put yourself through this drama. So if that is you, no, it happens to everyone. You hear about people in entertainment, or whether it's sports or singing or dancing or whatever it is, you guys hear about how they have all these crazy things, right? I think Michael Jordan used to wear the same socks all the time. I've even heard of people, getting really nauseated before they go on stage or doing all kinds of crazy stuff, but then you wouldn't know it because they do so well. But I think it's just we get in our heads about what we can accomplish, and sometimes no matter how much you know something, you just get really nervous. So that's pretty common, right? So we know that the first day is going to be overwhelming, it's going to be exciting, and probably you're going to spend a lot of your time doing a lot of paperwork. Now, if you recall back to when we talked about doing interviewing and how HR, will be the first person to contact you. Well, HR really has 2 roles, right? Really 3. But if you want to combine hiring and firing as one, the other one is training. Depending upon what type of company you go work for, let me tell you guys, the most attention that you will get from HR is when they're bringing you on or when they're doing some type of required training. When you are being brought onto a company, use your time wisely. Now is the time to ask as many questions as you can. Do not wait till you get to your job site or start working with your peers and start asking questions. They may not know, like your coworker may not know the 401k plan and how to get insurance. Maybe they don't even have the company's insurance. Like all those questions that you need to have figured out, do that with career services. With HR, right? You know that you're going to have a bunch of forms, make sure that you have all your documents and stuff like that. Not everybody brings, well, I don't want to ask that question, but if you are the type of person that carry your personal items with you, give me a thumbs up. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know, maybe because they had these little birth certificate cards during my time, but my birth certificate, my social security card, my kid's social security card, I don't know. I just always kept those things on me. I don't know if it's because I needed them or I don't know why, but a lot of people don't do that. I didn't realize people didn't do that, but I don't know why that was common for me. I don't know if it's because of going to doctor's appointments. I don't know why I did that, but it was very common for me to do that. Maybe because when I was in the military, I don't know. But that's not common for everyone, which is the point, right? So, if you have children, you're signing up for, benefits and stuff like that, they're going to ask for those things. So just make sure you have them. Obviously, when you go on site, there's, being on time is an understatement. Like, you don't want to be embarrassed, guys. You could be going through training. Another question you can ask HR. What does the first 2 weeks look like? You may think that you're gonna start the job, and then they're like, meet us in the conference room, and you're gonna be in training for 3 days or all day. Has anybody ever had to go through onboarding all day? Oh my goodness, that is painful. I'm like, why do they do that? But man, that's some painful stuff. I don't know how you guys feel, but I try not to fall asleep, but people do that. Or sometimes you'll have these trainings and they won't be in the location that you're working in. And how annoying is that? Because they don't tell you. I know I've had training before and they're like, oh, but you're going to meet at the site. And it was in a whole other town. I was like, what? Let me know. Thank goodness I have gas. I didn't even know that the training was going to be in a whole other town, and so that could be a thing too. But so make sure, ask those questions as much as you can. Now, do you ask that question when you're pre-interviewing? No. Do you ask that question like before you start work? Yes. Like you can ask those questions to the HR person, but when you get to that, in these trainings, that's going to probably be all day. You got to listen to all this story of how the company started, yada, yada, yada. Just be prepared for that, right? If you have any remote work, some of you may say, why would I have remote work? But you'd be surprised. Like I know of a lot of people that may work in traveling situations like welders or contractors, and technically you work remote. Like you may go to a job site, but maybe you have to do the paperwork, at home, or they give you a laptop. Like that's a real thing, right? Depends on the type of company you work for. So you may have to do some type of remote work, or sometimes they'll have you do onboarding remotely. That's a thing too, right? Ask those questions. You never know. Now, if you work for a smaller company, maybe that may not be the case, but it could be, right? You just want to be prepared. So when you do this new hire training, you may have to do it as a group. Sometimes it's one-on-one, depending upon what it is. Sometimes they call you out, one by one to do some personal stuff, but just be mindful that that could be the case, right? Sometimes they take you on tours and all kinds of stuff. Like again, now I would also say make sure you dress comfortable that first couple of days, because again, if it is training, you're sitting around, you're walking around, depending upon how big your institution is. Like you just want to be prepared. Nothing's worse than, having to go through all of this with a bunch of strangers and you're uncomfortable, right? So when it comes to onboarding, for all of us, we already know, or we should want to know these certain questions, right? These are great questions, again, to ask the HR department, because number one, you don't want your coworkers in your business, and number two, there's no bias, sometimes in asking HR. Sometimes your supervisor, you shouldn't be talking to about your 401k plan in the first place, right? It should be HR anyway. So it's okay to ask questions like hours. Now, I would even ask questions about hours even beforehand. Like I said, anything that you can ask to inform your decision, right? I think it's going to be important to know if I'm expected to work overtime or if there's no overtime. Like that may be something that you want to know. Who do I call in case of an emergency is going to be really important. If you're working off site, how do I call for technical issues? Maybe they give you some type of device. A lot of you that may work on jobs where you're working off site, you may have tablets or laptops or cell phones, so if you get into a little whatever, who's the IT department? Everybody knows, it's important to know that IT number nowadays, right? Who is the human resources person to contact? Sometimes the person that's given the training is not the person that you're going to contact for benefits or payroll or, training or, complaints, right? And that can, each person in HR can have their own role. So you want to know, who are the key players in the HR department, right? You probably don't need to know about sick time right away, but you probably do want to know when it starts to accrue, right? And then even some of the smallest things too is, is there a badge area? How do I get my security? Where do I pick up supplies? Like you would think that those are not important, but how many people ever showed up and they give your office and it's like, or a desk and it's like empty and you're like looking around and there's not even a pen. And maybe the last person was like, I'm taking all my stuff. You never know, right? So those are questions to ask, HR as much as possible, right? Because like I said, you don't really want to be bugging your coworker for this type of stuff if HR can help you. Now, if you're on site, of course, knowing when the building opens and closes. I don't know if anybody's ever showed up to their job and the building wasn't open. How crazy is that? Or what time it closes? Maybe you left something at the job and now you need to go back and get it. How embarrassing is that? Sometimes companies don't give new employees keys right away. Hopefully that won't be your situation, but that could be the case. It's important for you to know what time the building opens and closes. Anybody ever had to be trained on a company's telephone system? How annoying is that? Some companies have the most complicated telephone systems. Some of them have telephone systems where you can actually do conference calls on the telephone. It's wild. Most of you are probably thinking, I don't have to deal with that drama. Well, it just depends, right? It just depends. You won't be in the field all the time, right? But if you are remote, it's important to know, is there a check-in point? Are there weekly meetings? Again, you're not just going to be working all the time. You're going to have follow-up and check-ins, and, you may be expected to do some type of reporting, like writing up forms or something, especially if you're working on, contracts or dealing with customers, so you just want to know what that looks like after you have your HR training sessions. Normally what happens is you do breakout training and you train a little bit more with your actual team, right? So some of these questions could be answered, if job specific questions with your teammate, but things that, are more HR related, try to ask them, right? Like reimbursement. Everybody kind of wants to know, especially like for those of us that are going to be in welding and HVAC, and you may have to be driving all over town with your own car. The obvious question is like, who is going to reimburse me for all this gas, right? That's a question to ask HR, right? Like, don't get to your boss and ask, you don't want the guy thinking or the person thinking, oh, is that all you're thinking about? Well, yeah, I am concerned about my gas, but ask that, from HR. Those are the questions. So there's probably a ton more questions that you can ask. And chapter 13 kind of lays it out for you, but there's nothing wrong with being prepared for that. Now, give me a quick thumbs up. I just want to check in with the people that took that survey. If you were able to take the survey, I just want to make sure it's working. Okay, thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. All right, now, update on your professional network again. Now, okay, I'm going to say this. When I first start a job, I don't run to LinkedIn right away and post it. I don't. Can you? Absolutely. Why do I not do that? Because I never know. I never know. Has anybody ever started a job and then was like, oh, this job is not for me? And maybe you ended up taking another job, or maybe you just end up, yeah, right. Or maybe it's through no fault of your own, Amanda. Let me tell you about, a company hiring me. And I've had this happen more than once. And then there's no work. Or they're like, oh, the project got put on hold. And I've already put your little name up on my, LinkedIn saying I work for you. That's happened to me. And that obviously, with me working in consulting, okay, fine, whatever, there's no guarantee, but still, I've had that happen on a number of occasions and it infuriates me. I'm like, I took myself off the market. Y'all know what that's like, you taking yourself off the market for somebody or something, and then it turns out to be nothing, right? And I was or you accepted this position over another position and it turned out to be nothing. It's so frustrating, and that could happen even in your fields. A company can say, oh, we're hiring for this project. Now that happens a lot in finance and technology, but it happens a lot in trades too. They'll hire you, saying, oh, we're going to get this project, and maybe they didn't even get the final say that they have the project. And then what happens? They don't get the project and then they let you go, right? So I'm not saying any of that will happen to you, but it's good to ask those questions. Oh, we're hiring for this new project. Oh, you guys were awarded the project already? Find a way to work that question in, because you don't want somebody hiring you just to put you on the back burner and then, the position doesn't come through. Like, you don't want that thing. But even more so, when you post it on your LinkedIn is up to you. But I like to at least wait it out 30 days just to make sure it's on the up and up. Something else that you will become a lot familiar with, and it should come up in HR, is your performance evaluations. Who's ever gotten a performance evaluation? Now, this probably deserves more time because, my friends, now, it used to be really, really bad back in the day. Performance evaluations was a make it or break it because companies would want to see your performance evaluation back in my day, right? So if you had a bad supervisor that decided that they were going to stick it to you on your evaluation, and then the next company wanted to see your evaluation, can you imagine? A lot of government agencies still like to see performance evaluations. So why am I saying that to you? There are companies that don't do a good job at doing evaluations. They treat it like something they just have to do before the end of the year. And that can be very detrimental to you. Do not allow your supervisor to just write anything up on your evaluation. Has anybody ever been in that situation? If you work for a really good company, they should tell you on the front end, we do one evaluation, we do 2 evaluations a year. Here is what we expect of you. They should give you what your objectives are. You're part of the business now. So, if you're, just because you're doing the day-to-day work, that day-to-day work is tied to some contract. And they should say, okay, here's what we expect from you. We need a 95% satisfaction rate of all the residential customers that you're doing. And we need to make sure that you can do at least 50 a month. You need your expectations at the front end. So when your evaluation comes, there should be no surprises, right? There's been a lot of horror stories about performance evaluations. Take your evaluations seriously, guys. If you're trying to work your way up through the ranks at that company, your evaluation is going to be very important. If you try to go to work for the government, a lot of times they want to see those evaluations still, even in today's market. Now, luckily, a lot of other corporations, they don't really care about them anymore because they know that they're so subjective. But at any rate, what I tell people, keep a record of all your successes. You have to keep your own file. So when it comes time for you to do your evaluation, a lot of supervisors will say, you write it up first and then let me see it. Like, what? Really? Okay, no problem, Sarah, because I've already kept a file of the things I've done. So you may want to say, okay, what kinds of things do I need to keep? Well, simple stuff. They put you on a project. Talk about the project and how well you did with that project. If you've had to cover 2 positions in one, talk about that. If you had to, always the person that comes in and covers because somebody else is late, or, maybe somebody got, sick or hospitalized or whatever, and you covered for them. If your company put you on 2 projects and you're supposed to be doing one, whatever it is, write those wins down. So when it comes time to do your evaluation, you won't be trying to figure out, what have I done in this company? You'll know, right? It's going to be very, very important, because trust me, your supervisor's not going to know. They're not going to remember, right? You would think that they would, but a lot of times, they're thinking about their own situation. So you have to take that into your own hands, right? So we talked about etiquette last week. And is there a lot of workplace etiquette? Yes. Does it differ situation to situation or corporation to corporation? Absolutely. What's expected of you at a law firm is totally different from what's expected of you at a religious institution, or at a school or a construction site, right? So etiquette is subjective based upon where you work, but you need to be mindful of that. Now, see, I take the approach of, I use proper etiquette everywhere. So I don't have to code switch from one situation to the next, because there are a lot of people that have a hard time doing that. Give me a thumbs up if you've ever engaged with someone that has a hard time switching. They're used to like locker room talk in this environment, and then they get in another environment and they don't know how to, yeah, right? And that's because in one environment it's okay, but in another environment it's not. And you can always see people that struggle with that. I think our president, to be honest with you, struggles with that. But I think the president struggles with that because the president, think about this for a minute, has never had a job. Can you imagine? Never having had to work for someone. It's impossible for him to truly understand. No one's ever said you need to clock in. That's the problem with elite, right? So I don't think people really understand. Like, one thing that I see in someone like our president that has never had a job is, you don't know what it's like to have to work for somebody else. Does anybody else know, can point that out in the president? And I'm only talking about from a business perspective, right? So I totally get a business person. He's owned his own business his entire life. He's made all his own decisions. Like, it's unfathomable for him to think, okay, I have to answer to someone. Like, what are you talking about? Right. So I get that in him. I think that's part of some of the issues with him, the code switching, is because if you've never had to do it before, it could be a hard thing to do. Right. So that same token, if you've never had to work in a corporate environment before, and now all of a sudden you have to work in this corporate environment, and they have a whole different set of ethics, and etiquette. You have to learn that, right? And I know it's hard. So that's why I always stick with what I was taught, right? Luckily I'm a Southern girl, be proper wherever you go. Don't go too high, don't go too low. Just stay in the middle, and you should be fine. Like, just because they're doing it over there, don't you do it, right? But there are people that have a hard time with the code switching because they have never been in those environments. It's not their fault, but I don't blame them for it. I just think, well, if you've never had to be in that environment before, or you've never had to do that before, that can be an issue. And we all see it walking around, right? And I'm going to tell you, I am one of those old people that are like, man, I wish these young people would do this, and I wish these people would know better not to do that. But in their environment, it is common. Can you imagine? So if a kid's walking around and you can hear the music coming out of their headphones, or speaking loudly, how many people it just drives them nuts when you hear a person talking loud on the phone, like in a restaurant or in a line or somewhere else, and like you hear all their conversation, and you're like, sir, ma'am, I don't really need to know what y'all did last night. Could you please? You're embarrassed for them, and you're embarrassed for yourself because you hear it, you try to ignore it, but I don't know. To me, it's just like, oh my God, I wish this person would know, like, that's not proper. But people don't know. That's the point. Like, we make these assumptions, but everyone doesn't know. It's so important for you to understand what the etiquette is in your environment. You do not want to be judged at work where it can, lead to some type of action, disciplinary action for you, because you don't know what the proper etiquette is. Now, one that just really, really drives me nuts is cleanliness. Cleanliness. I know some of us are saying, oh, what are you talking about? No, I'm going to talk about it because let me tell you what. I worked in a corporate environment, and I had a coworker, bless his heart. And you guys have seen cubicles before, right? Has anybody ever seen the show Hoarders, or if you've ever heard of the Hoarders, that television show? That was his cubicle. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating. This man, and he would, he would bring in cases of, I think he was in love with Diet Dr. Pepper, and he would have bags everywhere. He would have paper everywhere. We worked in the finance department. Walking into his cubicle was like walking into the show Hoarders. I was afraid. Anybody else afraid of bugs? Man, and my cubicle backed up to his cubicle. And I'm OCD, not to the extreme, but I just like everything to be in its place, right? Like, if you come to my house, you're like, where is everything? I'm like, behind closed doors, that's where everything is, in its place, right? I'm not a neat freak, but I like everything to be in its place. Man, can you imagine? And he didn't think anything was wrong with it. I don't know, but it happens, right? We all, and those things will happen. We all have heard of people eating people's lunch out the refrigerator and all kinds of weird stuff, right? Why is that important? Those types of things can affect your work, guys. Anybody ever been in a place where somebody ate someone else's lunch? I've heard people getting disciplinary action over stuff like that. Like, I'm telling, isn't it embarrassing, Erica? Like, who eats other people's lunches? I remember when I was married, someone ate my husband's lunch. He was so upset. And he worked in he's worked in logistics. So, the big warehouse, all this stuff everywhere, and somebody ate his lunch like twice. He was very, 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 very upset, is all I'm going to say about that. All right. So it's a big thing. Obviously, something else, lastly, for most of us, is workplace safety. In addition to getting training on basic HR stuff, many of you, every last one of your industries, you will be receiving a lot of training. OSHA training, workplace training, making sure it falls and slips, lifting hazardous materials. Get ready for it. There's going to be a lot of audits, a lot of people coming in, checking stuff all the time, right? So that's something else that I'm sure your instructors have talked about, but that's going to be a big deal. Now there's opportunity in that too, because you can get certified in a lot of that stuff as well and become section leads and, audit experts and all kinds of stuff. So that too is good. All right, my friends, here's your question for the day. Here's what I want to know. What is your biggest first day anxiety? What is your biggest first day anxiety? All right, what is your biggest first day anxiety? All right, my friends, please remember, short week, short week, short week. We are out of here 9:59 on Thursday. All assignments for week 3 and week 4 must be in by Wednesday. Hard stop. Wednesday. I cannot take any work on the last day of class outside of your final and your final project. Please, please, please. And thank you. I know I don't have that issue for anybody here, but I just want to make it known. If you don't have any other further questions for me, guys, have a great day, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.